Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time at which you're listening to this narration. We're interested to know in which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. I don't pay you to play that military garbage. The bar owner yelled, his voice slicing through the music like broken glass as he ripped the cord from the amplifier. "You're fired!" Jake's only crime had been to show a moment of profound respect to an old veteran sitting quietly in the corner. But what that arrogant bar owner didn't know was that the old veteran was the honored guest of a reclusive billionaire who was in his bar that very night, preparing to make the city's largest charitable donation, and he had just failed a test he didn't even know he was taking. Jake Callahan wasn't just a musician. He was a healer whose medicine was 6 steel strings and a quiet, mournful melody. Before his worn-out acoustic guitar was propped up on the sticky, beer-stained stage of the Gilded Cage, a high-end lounge that dripped with superficial wealth, it had rested against the dusty, sun-baked wall of a field hospital in Afghanistan. As a former Army medic, Jake had seen more than his share of pain, the kind that rips through flesh and bone. But it was the other kind of pain, the silent, invisible kind that had followed him home. In the long, agonizing nights after a firefight, after the chaos of battle had subsided into the eerie quiet of the desert, he would take out his old guitar. He would play for the wounded, for the men whose lives had been irrevocably altered. His music was a quiet whisper against the roar of suffering, a brief moment of peace in a world of war. He played for soldiers who would never walk again, for men who were seeing their last sunset, for the ghosts of the friends he had lost. He learned then that some wounds are invisible, and that honor, true honor, is often silent, found not in parades, but in the quiet dignity of a man carrying his scars without complaint. Now, back in the civilian world, he played for a different kind of wounded, the lonely and the rich, who filled the silence of their own lives with empty laughter and the clinking of expensive glasses. The bar's owner, a slick, self-absorbed man named Marcus, had hired Jake for his undeniable talent, but he despised his soul. Marcus saw music as auditory wallpaper, a sophisticated background noise designed to encourage patrons to spend more money on overpriced cocktails. He'd often tell Jake, "Less of the sad stuff, kid. Play something people can talk over." For Jake, each night was a small death, a chipping away at the very reason he played music in the first place. One Tuesday night, the usual crowd was in attendance, men in tailored suits discussing stock prices and women in sparkling dresses gossiping about people who weren't there. Their conversations were loud, but their words were meaningless. In the far corner of the bar, almost swallowed by the deep velvet shadows, sat an old man. He was impeccably dressed in a simple, dated but well-pressed suit. It was his posture that caught Jake's eye, ramrod straight, even while seated, a discipline that time could not erode. He nursed a single glass of water, his eyes scanning the room, not with curiosity, but with a kind of calm, quiet, and deeply analytical assessment. He was invisible to everyone else, a ghost from another era amidst the modern opulence. But Jake saw him. Through the shared, unspoken language of service, he saw the subtle cadence in the man's stillness. He saw the honor. As Jake played a soulful, quiet melody, a group of loud, arrogant young men at the table next to the veteran began to openly mock him. "Look at this old-timer," one sneered, his voice slurring slightly. "Probably thinks this is the VFW hall and is waiting for the bingo to start." They laughed, a harsh, grating sound that made Jake's fingers freeze on his guitar strings. The old man didn't flinch. He just continued to stare straight ahead, his dignity an impenetrable shield against their childish insults. But Jake felt each taunt like a physical blow. He saw his brothers in arms, the men he had served with, the men he had mourned, being disrespected in the most casual, cruel way imaginable. He finished his song to scattered, indifferent applause, but his mind was made up. He had to do something. The medic in him, the soldier in him, wouldn't allow this wound to go untended. But you won't believe this. His next act wasn't on the set list Marcus had approved. He stepped back up to the microphone, the spotlight making him squint. "This next one," he said, his voice quiet but carrying with a newfound intensity across the suddenly attentive room, "is for the gentleman in the corner. For his service, and for the service of all who came before and after him." He didn't play a rock anthem or a soulful ballad. Instead, he let his fingers find the familiar, melancholic, and sacred notes of taps. The melody, haunting and beautiful, floated through the bar like a prayer. A sacred silence fell over the room. The loud laughter died. The clinking glasses stopped. For 30 profound seconds, the gilded cage was transformed from a den of excess into a hall of honor. The old veteran looked up at Jake, and for the first time that night, a small, sad, but deeply grateful smile touched his lips. He slowly, deliberately, raised his glass of water in a silent, reverent toast. The moment of profound connection was shattered by Marcus, who stormed towards the stage, his face purple with rage. He ripped the cord from Jake's amplifier, and the last note died with a painful, electronic screech. "I don't pay you to play that military garbage," he yelled, his voice echoing in the stunned silence. "You're driving away my high-rolling customers with your funeral music. You're fired! Get your stuff and get out." Jake didn't argue. He simply nodded, his face calm. He carefully placed his guitar in its case, and as he walked off the stage, he gave the old veteran a subtle, respectful nod of his own. He had lost his job, but he had kept his honor. He hadn't seen the biggest surprise yet. As Jake was walking out the door, a quiet, elegantly dressed man who had been sitting at another table with an unobstructed view of the entire scene stood up and intercepted him. "Young man," he said, his voice calm and full of a quiet, immense authority, "that was the finest and most courageous performance I have ever witnessed." Marcus, seeing his wealthiest and most mysterious patron talking to the musician he'd just fired, rushed over, a fake, oily smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Sterling, I'm so sorry about that little disruption. He's been dealt with. Can I get you another drink on the house?" Mr. Sterling turned to Marcus, his expression unreadable, as cold and placid as a frozen lake. "No, thank you, Marcus. In fact, I will be leaving as well. I came here tonight to make a decision, a very important one, and it was at this exact moment that everything changed." Sterling gestured with a subtle nod towards the old veteran, who was now slowly getting up to leave. "You see that man you and your patrons were mocking? That is Mr. Peterson. He is a decorated veteran of 3 wars. He is also the chairman of the Sterling Family Foundation's Grant Committee." "My foundation," Marcus's jaw dropped. The air in his lungs seemed to vanish, replaced by a cold, heavy dread. Sterling continued, his voice dropping to a low, powerful tone that held the weight of a judge's gavel. "I was planning to donate $5 million tonight to a local arts program. I came to your bar, a place that supposedly represents the pinnacle of this city's culture, to make my final observation. I wanted to see if this city's soul was one worth investing in. I was about to leave, disgusted by the shallow, cruel spectacle I was witnessing. But then your musician here," he said, putting a firm, reassuring hand on Jake's shoulder, "showed me something extraordinary. He showed me that character, honor, and decency still exist, even in a gilded cage like this. He passed a test you didn't even know you were taking." Marcus began to stammer, to apologize, his words a pathetic, jumbled mess, but Sterling held up a hand, silencing him instantly. "I have made my decision. The $5 million grant will not be going to the city's art museum. Instead, it will be used to establish a new foundation. A foundation that will provide music therapy programs for veterans suffering from trauma and the invisible wounds of war. And," he said, looking at Jake with a genuine warm smile, "I believe I have just found its first director." He handed Jake a simple, elegant business card. "Call me tomorrow. We have important work to do." He then walked over to the old veteran, Mr. Peterson, and shook his hand warmly. "Thank you for your service, sir, and for helping me find a true artist with the heart of a soldier." The 2 men walked out together, leaving Marcus standing alone in the middle of his silent, gilded cage, his business and his soul utterly bankrupt. Jake stood by the door, holding a simple business card that felt heavier and more valuable than any guitar he had ever owned. He hadn't just gotten a new job. He had gotten his mission back, kindness and merit are recorded, even when they go unnoticed. To continue hearing stories that prove it, don't forget to follow the Merit Ledger and leave a comment about a time when a small act of kindness made a huge difference. Because every life is a record worth reading.